So I'm delighted to have here today Tim Reeve, Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer of the V&A, and Dr. Gus Casely-Hayford, OB, Director of the V&A East. So thanks both of you for coming along this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's lovely to be here, Charles.
Good stuff. And for those of you who don't know, the V&A Victoria and Albert Museum, it's the world's leading museum of art and design and performance. It's currently being transformed by this hugely ambitious project over decades called Future Plan. And this includes the creation of new galleries, visitor facilities, restoration work on the original building. And 85% of the museum's public spaces have been transformed in the last 15 years. I'm necessarily going to give a potted bio with you both, because if I read out the full bios, we would be here for 25 minutes. So Tim has been Deputy Director since 2013, and he has a strategic operational overview of all museum activities. He also leads the divisions responsible for commercial and digital activities, exhibitions, Future Plan, which I mentioned, finance and resources, marketing and comms, security, and the V&A's wider international strategy. He's also the current lead on the project, the V&A East, which is the project we'll be talking about in the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in East London, which will see a new research and collection centre alongside a new museum. And Dr. Augustus Casely-Hayford OBE is a curator and a cultural historian, broadcaster and author. He is director of the V&A East, and before this he was director of the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art in Washington, DC. He's also presented a number of series for Sky, BBC Radio and TV, and served on the board of many cultural institutions, such as the National Trust and the National Portrait Gallery. So it's great to have you both here. I thought we could start the discussion with a look at the perhaps inevitable COVID situation. And I know you guys reopened in August, so if you could perhaps, Tim, give us an overview of how that's gone.
Thanks, Charles, and great to be with you. I mean, it's gone, I think, as well as we could have hoped it would go, because we've in many ways had to sort of redesign the way we run the museum as a public building. So we, at the moment, what visitors get is actually a unique experience of the V&A. Normally the V&A in happier times is extremely busy, and you might even kind of say that it's too busy in some parts of the museum. What people get now, because of the need for us to reduce capacity very markedly, is a unique experience where they feel like they have some of the galleries all to themselves. So in one respect, there's a very positive component to the new way we're operating. It's a sort of special moment in time. We've had to think very carefully about how we welcome visitors to the building and and sort of find out again what the building can do, what it can't do, but also what it can do to rediscover what it was sort of designed for. But the fact is that we can't carry on like this for very long, because visitor numbers in this new regime are 15%, 15% of what they would normally be. So, you know, it's absolutely fine, and in some ways there are positives for the next few months. But looking ahead to next year and the year after, obviously we need to try and work out how we can gradually get back to something like we were before in terms of being a sort of cultural attraction. But it's gone well. Visitors like what we've done and can see that we have tried to create a very safe environment, but also an environment where they can come in and relax as far as it's possible to relax outside of your own home at the moment, and to reconnect with what, after all, are their kind of collections. And also, I think really importantly, staff who are in those front of house visitor facing positions also kind of look at the experience as being a very positive one, because understandably there's a certain degree of kind of trepidation as people come back to work in visitor facing positions. So it feels like we've got the balance right in some very unusual circumstances, and it, as it were, will do us for now. But looking ahead, it's not a sustainable way of running our museum. So I would summarise it as so far so good.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Did you consider doing curated visits like the National Gallery?
Yeah, and we will and do some of that now. So we are able to offer guided tours. We did a brilliant curated tour of the kimono exhibition, but only available online during lockdown. And obviously, as we move into a situation where we are able to open a bit more, we are doing things with special events with members and so on in some of the galleries, because at the moment, not all galleries are actually open. We've opened the first 3 floors of the museum, the most visited floors of the museum, but things like ceramics and glass and furniture are currently out of bounds. So we are able to offer some guided tours of those galleries, but it is like with everything else. It is step by step, quite a gradual process.
Right. Okay. And the kimono exhibition is just going ahead as it was before, and I know it's had fantastic reviews, but that experience, presumably you're pulsing people through it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the, for us in our world, I mean, leaving aside the dreadful things that have been going on in the outside world, for us, kimono had been open for 2 weeks and had, as you say, these wonderful reviews, and people loved it. It's such a vibrant exhibition. The collections we've been able to pull together are just, astonishing, and they make you smile, as well as telling a really important story of kimono as a sort of cultural icon almost from Japan, but also its impact on the world. So having to close that after 2 weeks and mothball it for months, as you can imagine, curatorially for us is a very difficult thing to do. So, on the plus side, we have been able to extend it so that when we reopened it, it's still there for people to visit. It's actually been very well designed, because it's quite a linear exhibition, and it is almost one way. We've not designed it as one way, but it's actually very easy for people to find their way through it safely. Obviously, again, we're not able to provide the same capacity, but those who go into the kimono exhibition, unusually for a V&A exhibition, are able to enjoy it without it being too busy. So we have to take the positives, out of it.
Yeah, good stuff. And Gus, you speaking of COVID, you started your new job, about the week the lockdown started. So did you get a chance to, I don't know, work out where the water cooler was, for example?
Yeah, it was great timing, but a fantastic team who have been enormously accommodating to me as a new member during this challenging time, and working, as we've learnt to, remotely and delivering on such an intensive and demanding project has been challenging, but we've actually used the time really well. Because one of the things that this period has been very conducive to has been planning and thinking laterally, and also I think for me, I live quite close to Hampstead Heath here, and watching people in this period responding to having limited access to culture, and how they've actually attempted to use public spaces in really interesting ways. I wander across the Heath and I see impromptu concerts and silent discos and readings and all sorts of things. And it's just reminded me of how much we need culture and how much we need institutions like the V&A. And I really look forward to over the coming years, as we open and engage with those communities in East London, of giving them a kind of auditorium in which they can bring that kind of energy into our spaces.
Yeah, I think definitely one thing that's been heartening about the pandemic has been the amount of public support for museums and attractions that are suffering terrible times, but people have been really supportive in visiting them when they can. So I think that's been a really positive thing. Moving on to V&A East, which is this fantastic new project in East London. Tim, I thought as project lead, you could perhaps introduce us to the 2 buildings and what the sites are and why that location.
Well, I mean, the first thing I just wanted to say, Charles, is Gus is being incredibly modest about what he has managed to achieve arriving at the V&A in lockdown. I don't quite know how he and others who have joined organisations in that time have managed, but it has been a really astonishing few months, and Gus has made his presence kind of felt very, very powerfully. I mean, and also to say on V&A East that what we've moved to now with Gus's arrival is a situation where, as it were, it's a co-production between Gus and I for the next few years. And we're leading the project together. But it started honestly on day one of my arrival at the V&A, where one of the things that was sort of literally plonked on my desk was this big sort of inch thick master planning document produced by Ola Sheeran about what might be possible in the Olympic Park after the Olympics. And with the director at the time saying, have a look at this and tell me what you think, you know, thud.
Yeah.
And one of the things that sort of leapt out very strongly, almost immediately, as an opportunity was there were two things. The first was the opportunity for synergy and partnership, if we were to decide we wanted to be part of it, seemed almost exponential. Mm-hmm. There were the partners that were being talked about as moving in part or whole to the park. There were the partners that were potential partners already in the park. And then this, in the wider community around the park, and this great sort of creative heritage of that part of London. Very, very powerful, a real sort of draw, almost like a tractor beam. And the second, of course, is the people who live in that part of London, the potential audience for organisations like the V&A to connect with in ways that we have not done before, because of the way that we have been as an organisation, not because of the way they have been as a potential audience. So we fairly kind of quickly decided that it had potential and we liked it, and it was described in various ways. But I always quite liked this idea of a new Albertopolis for the digital age sort of concept. But let's not get kind of stuck on kind of labels. And then over time, as these projects always ebb and flow, and they expand and then contract and then expand again and evolve. And we ended up, I think, in a couple of years ago now, I think with this really, really nice two-site proposition for V&A East, because two things came together accidentally. One was the opportunity to have a new museum in the Olympic Park alongside London College of Fashion and Sadler's Wells, and the BBC and so on. At the same time, we had this, as it were, problem to solve, which was our entire reserve collection, which currently is in Blythe House in West London, in this big Victorian former savings building, post office savings building, having to move that to somewhere else. And we didn't know where that somewhere else was. And then this sort of light bulb moment happened where you thought, hold on, we've got to bring these two things together. Imagine a situation where the V&A is moving to Stratford. It is bringing its expertise and its know-how and its desire to connect its mission with a new audience. And, by the way, it can bring 250,000 objects, you know, and 1,000 archives and, you know, 300,000 library books, and make that part of the proposition, which is to bring its entire non-display collection and to offer it to East London as part of this new museum. So we have two buildings, two construction projects. One is a new building as part of the East Bank development, literally next door to the London College of Fashion, right in the sort of crossroads of the East Bank development, which we will programme, and Gus you know, is the guy who can really develop an astonishing creative programme for that building. And then maybe a 10-minute walk away, a sort of retrofit project, which I think is kind of brilliant for us. You know, museums can get quite sort of bogged down sometimes in these sort of hero, new build, bricks and mortar projects. To bring our reserve collection to the Olympic Park as part of Here East, which is the sort of repurposed broadcasting centre from the Olympic Games, and to create out of that reserve collection, not to create accessible storage or visible storage, but to make a new type of museum experience, a new type of cultural attraction from what we currently describe as a stored collection. And having those two things working together, I think will be very powerful and a unique proposition. But crucially, bringing the collection, bringing the objects, bringing this amazing legacy to Stratford and opening up, because it is intended and was brought together to be a source of inspiration, what we describe as this creative source book. To open it up in that part of London, I think is laden with kind of possibility. So that's the plan for V&A East, and Gus's arrival is so important because, you know, I'm quite good and like and experienced in the sort of placemaking and inside of it, but it needs a really strong creative vision that really resonates with our audience. And, you know, we're so lucky to have managed to get Gus to agree to come and join the journey.
Good stuff. And Gus, because you were working at one of the great Smithsonian museums over in the States, and you've obviously come over to London for this project. So what was it that attracted you to the project?
I do think in great part it's the reputation of the incredible team at the V&A, you know, that Tim and Tristram and that incredible sort of curatorial team, that what they've delivered has transformed aspiration for our sector. If you look at those spaces that have been transformed at the V&A, the way in which the exhibition program has changed the paradigm, both experientially, but also in terms of audience numbers, and the sorts of things that can be said about fashion in accessible ways. It is an amazing proposition, the V&A at the moment, and to feel that one could join that team at this moment, it was just an enormous pleasure. And to be working with personnel, with people of the caliber of Tim, it's just every day I kind of feel incredibly blessed. But also, I do love this country. I do absolutely adore Britain, and there's nothing like spending time away from something you love for helping just to re-establish just how important it is to you. And so coming back, I really do feel that I want to, as we go through this period of transition post-Brexit, that I want to make a contribution. And I feel that this is a project that can really speak to a generation, and to speak to a generation in a locality that have not traditionally been given the very best in the way of publicly sponsored culture. And what an exciting project it is. As Tim describes, this incredible new proposition of 2 new buildings, but also that are amazing collections. And what we want to do is to create a kind of interface with our audiences, with our local communities, that will feel two-way. We want this to feel like their space, and that them being in it will be the thing that animates the space, that brings it to life, that is one half of the proposition. Not just buildings, not just objects, but objects which come to life through a kind of dialogue with the local communities. And it's that dynamism, that electricity about the interaction between community and object and space that we really want to see come to life in the 2 building propositions at V&A East.
And I know you've used the word immersive a lot about these projects, and you've called you've called the collection an immersive cabinet of curiosities, and talked about how it will revolutionise the way collections are accessed and experienced. Perhaps you could elaborate a little bit more on the immersive nature. Will it be behind-the-scenes tours, or? And I know the building at the Research and Collections Centre, it looks pretty extraordinary with the glass and the display systems.
Sorry, Tim, carry on.
Well, I mean, it's very difficult to describe the building, and it's kind of quite easy to get. I mean, Gus and I were sort of talking about it the other day, because it's very easy to get drawn into quite tired, well-worn ways of describing this sort of adventure. You know, immersive. Yeah. You know, open display, public. You know, sort of open storage, and these sorts of things. The idea, particularly at Here East, is that, and we selected the right architect for it, and the right building, and the right part of the Olympic Park, was to design something that brought people right into the middle of the collection. It will be immersive because we have designed it in a way that draws people right in. You know, this isn't an experience where people will, in a very carefully moderated way, be able to nibble around the edges, and then inevitably you reach the point where the stop sign comes up and you can go no further. It's been designed so that you are dropped into the heart of it, so that people feel like they aren't having to get beyond kind of barriers all the time, that you've been allowed right into the centre from which you can now explore outwards into the collection. And the Cabinet of Curiosities, in a way, isn't the right description either, because that gives a sense of something quite traditional and quite set. And what this will be, as well as a different type of museum experience, of course, is a working sort of logistics centre for the V&A collection, where objects will come and go. They will be conserved, or they'll go on tour, or they'll need to go off display because they've been in, you know, they can't take too much light and so on. So we need to get a real sense of animation,
right,
in the Here East building as well. So immersive is feeling a bit kind of hackneyed at this kind of stage. This is about bringing the public and the collection closer together, and to allow a different sort of set of interactions to arise from that. But Gus, sorry, I talked over you, but you know, Gus is the expert in the collection side of things for sure.
Tim, brilliant as ever. And I think for me, I mean, you can access collections in most public museums. I mean, you might need a PhD, you might need letters of recommendation. And once you get in, that you're going to probably have to navigate other additional layers of bureaucracy and security. And then you might then be able to view the objects, and it probably won't be in the most comfortable physical circumstances. And this, what we want to do is to change that completely. I mean, these are collections that they are held in trust for the public. They belong to all of us, and we want to offer them back to the public. And that description that Tim very vividly crafted of the institution as this box, this giant box within which you are placed right into the center of the collection, and you will be able to stand in the collection. At the very center of the building, there's a huge glass atrium with a glass floor, glass balustrade, so you can stand in the center of the building and you can see most of those 250,000 objects from a single spot, and just have a sense of the complexity, the breadth, the diversity of this collection, and the directions of potential investigation that you could potentially go on. And it's a point at which it's sort of equalizing. Whether you be an academic, whether you be an artist, whether you be a young child who's coming for the first time into a collection centre, that this will be something which conveys a sense of the possibilities of the manifold stories that you can tell through our collection. And what I'm hoping is that proposition, that invitation will then activate, dynamize in the minds and imaginations of our visitors a sense that this is a space in which we want them to then add their own stories, to iterate the interpretation with their own contributions, to do that through digital engagement, through social media, but to tell us what they think, what our objects and what our space makes them feel. And I think, you know, that objects aren't just to be held in aspic and to be contained by academic interpretation, that these were things which were made with love and care and thought. And we want to reactivate that love and that care through interaction with the public, and to give them the space and the time to see these things and to engage with them in ways which we hope will convey a sense of the possibility for us all to be involved in these kinds of discussions. So we want this space to be somewhere that you come and you visit and you leave behind something of yourself, as well as taking away, hopefully, something which changes you. And over a period of months and years that we will accrete, along with all of the visits and the memories, we will accrete a kind of body of interpretive history that will, I hope, demonstrate something of how this repository is not just something which is held in aspic, but which is constantly changing because of the way in which it's dynamized by these visits. And I think that is something which we lose with museums, the sense that they are spaces of continual transformation, not just of people, but also of the narratives that surround the institution. And we want to be able to capture that dynamic and be able to engage people across the world digitally in helping us to think about what objects might mean, both to the people who create them and to those who use them, and to those who are learning about them and the possibilities of how they might engage and touch the lives of others. I think that, as a proposition, is utterly unique and really exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking as a punter, I find the idea that there's such a huge volume of your store being on display and access is really exciting, because I know I was brought up in Oldham, and I've been to the Oldham Art Gallery. It's a lovely little art gallery, loads of times over the last 40 years. And I was at an exhibition at the Uffizi a couple of years ago, which was the British in Florence, and they had a beautiful pre-Raphaelite on loan from Oldham Art Gallery. I'd never seen it. So it must have been in storage for all that time. And then, so the idea that you can just, you know, reveal all these treasures you've got that people might not have seen for a long time is absolutely fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit more about
volume? I was going to say volume is so important. That word is very important for what we're doing in Stratford, because the collection centre bit of it is fundamentally is just an enormous warehouse.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the broadcasting centre for the Olympics. It's absolutely vast. Yeah. It's 150,000 square feet, the V&A demise, that we've been able to then turn in from a sort of 2-storey space into a 4-storey space through the design of the public network that Liz, that Gus described, that Liz Diller was the sort of cornerstone of her sort of design concept. But volume is what we don't really have at the V&A in South Kensington. It sounds strange to say because it's such an enormous building. And that volume enables us to really shift the dial in terms of what visitors can get at, what they can see and what they can then get at. And one of the things we're able to do is some of the really big objects, you know, room sets, big architectural fragments, we can actually form part of the display, part of the public network at the collection centre in a way that we would never be able to do otherwise. So the volume side of it is super, super important. And then the design philosophy side of it is very important. And the fact that it's a warehouse, for me, is very important. And this is retrofit. And there is a sort of an industrial feel of it is really important. It's like a beautiful warehouse. There's no reduction in sort of design quality or finishing, but it is a warehouse, and that feels quite on message with this idea of it being a kind of creative source book and developing through design a different atmosphere for a museum experience, a different tone, something that is more kind of welcoming and more kind of naturally welcoming for more people, I think is really important. So it's the bringing together with those ideas that Gus just described, and that sort of creative philosophy with how that lands in design terms to create something that will feel different than a typical traditional museum experience.
Right, and you've got some objects that literally haven't been seen for generations that you can display, you know.
I mean, the sheer scale of the space. I'm one of the things I can't wait to see is having come from America, where I got, over the 2 years that I was there, I got for the very first time to see Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water, which was astounding because it's such an iconic building. But within the V&A collection, Edward J. Kaufman, who commissions Falling Water, he, as I'm sure you know, that he was a businessman who works in Pittsburgh, and his office is a kind of exquisite installation of a sort of condensed version of many of the architectural tropes that you see explored at Falling Water in this one exquisite space that was his study in one of his stores. He owned a number of different department stores. These are department stores which went on to be bought out by Macy's, and he was hugely wealthy, and his passion was architecture. And so this space, which is, it wasn't his home, it was his office. It was the space in which he conceived so many of his incredible ideas. And you get a feeling of this being an environment in which he was negotiating with an architect who's absolutely at the top of his creative abilities, one of the greatest architects who ever lived. And he creates something which is actually visually quite modest, but which is utterly exquisite, using plywood and quite modest materials, but using them to create something which is so exquisite. And we can recreate that three-dimensional space within our collection center. And it's just, for me, I can't quite believe that I'm working on a project in which that is a possibility. And to be able to have that alongside, you know, great 15th century pieces like the outer mirror ceiling, which was this amazing Spanish carved, gorgeous wood ceiling that hung in the 15th century above a nobleman's palace. It's another exquisite thing. But to have these pieces that you can actually see in three dimensions, that relive these moments from history through these not reconstructions, but actual pieces that have been placed within our space, that for me is something which is so special. And I can't wait, because we can do that, but we can also tell the stories that will help to animate them. It's going to be something which is really unique, and I can't wait to see it actually unfold. That's
fantastic. And I suppose the logistically, it's going to be quite an operation getting all these objects across London.
Yep.
Is that your
remit? It's short. Well, I mean, you know, we like to share these sort of challenges and opportunities, but yeah, I mean, it's a big part of the project. It's a massive logistical challenge, and in a way, Charles, that's why you wouldn't choose to do this necessarily as an organisation. You wouldn't choose to move your entire non-display collection from A to B. If you're going to do it, if you're going to go to all of that trouble, you might as well end up at the other side in a place which transforms what you're able to do with that collection. So we've managed to shift our mindset as an organisation on this from something that was a big institutional headache, because it's a government-owned building and government would like us to leave, into a massive institutional opportunity. But the logistics, I mean, you can imagine, we're talking about 4 lorry loads. When we get up to proper decant, the decant phase, 4 lorry loads of V&A objects a day going from Blythe House to East London. And when you think about it like that, it gives you a sense of the kind of this, and that will happen every day for a year.
Wow.
That's what we're talking about here. So huge logistical exercise, but symbolically as well, it just feels so powerful and exciting that we are lifting all of those objects from somewhere where you can go and see them, of course, but as Gus described, letter of recommendation, PhD, a really well thought through reason why you need to be allowed in. moving it, you know, as it moves across London, we know we are taking it to a better place, that collection to a better place where it is going to be seen more, used more. It's going to inspire more people. It's a headache, but it's also, you know, it's a great prize at the same time.
Yeah, millions of people can see this stuff for the first time, so it's a really fantastic opportunity.
I hope it's millions. We hope it's millions of people.
Right, it will be.
And Gus, you've spoken specifically about your interest in wanting to increase the V&A's focus on African art and design, so help build up that collection. So what can you tell us about your plans in that regard?
I mean, interestingly, the V&A has a fantastic collection of African objects, and one of the things that I think that we can actually do is to, with these new spaces, is to make more of them. And you know, we have big things like the sorts of things we've been describing, that you know, the outer mirror ceiling, that it's something which, of course, it's Spanish in origin, but its themes link us back to North Africa, to the Berber, who were some of the people who actually inspired that work. And we want to be able to create those connections across geography and time that include Africa, which is so often excluded from when one thinks about particularly pre-20th century art history. And, you know, we have exquisite things. We have Ashanti gold weights, which are, you know, some of them the size of a fingernail, but exquisitely carved. We have amazing textiles, some of my favorite pieces in the collection, and we want to get those pieces out on display and to tell that story alongside all of the other stories from around the world that we can tell. But we also want, as we go forward, to try to recalibrate some of the areas of weakness within the collection by adding to them, by bringing some contemporary work into the collection that will tell some of the sorts of complex stories and help us to convey some of the sorts of difficult things that many peoples of African descent deal with. You know, there are great contemporary artists that are helping us to navigate our way through issues around Black Lives Matters and around areas of colonial legacies and enslavement. And we feel that art is a good way of helping us to find a path through some of these very, very difficult issues. And if we can do that, for many of the visitors who come into our space, they will be young. We're hoping lots of school children will be wanting to visit. And for them, some of these difficult and contested histories might be hard to navigate. And it's very often art which offers interfaces into some of this that can make it possible for us to convey the difficult, the contested, the troubling in ways that are palatable for a wide range of audiences. So we want to deploy a variety of techniques of looking through our collection and shining a light on particular areas that that may need augmenting over a period of time, but then also for us to build new areas of collection and to also, particularly at the waterfront site, for us to make exhibitions that really show how contemporary African art is transforming global practice and helping us to think about some of the big issues of the day.
And I know you've both spoken as well about the opportunity to collaborate with other institutions with V&A. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'd love us to be working with, I mean, we're on a park with the BBC, with UCL, with UCL, who just yesterday we signed an MOU with. We're going to collaborate with them on doctoral theses and research, which is really exciting, and having them as neighbours. But we also want to find ways of collaborating with Sadler's Wells, London College of Fashion, and then further afield, other institutions across Britain and our nation, and to look at international collaborations. I think that's really important for us, to find ways of bringing other voices to this bit of London, that we're going to be in a period, I imagine, in which not just post-COVID, but also thinking about sustainability, in which probably the gap year may not be a thing that everyone will be wanting to throw themselves into. I imagine that international travel might be less done by people. We want to become a kind of window on the world, a way in which we can travel and engage with contemporary and historic practice from right across the globe. And we want to engage with it in ways that will mean that people can come and they can leave a little bit of themselves behind, tell us what they think about these places and their experiences, so that there is a kind of way in which iteratively we are continually changing because of the contributions of our audiences and the way in which they're interacting and dynamizing what they see when they come through our spaces. So I'm really excited by this as a proposition, because I can't think of another institution which has this as an offer, which we are trying to ask people to come into our spaces and both be changed by what they see, but also to contribute to changing us as well, to leaving something of themselves behind. I think it's such an exciting time that one looks at the way in which Gen Z are interacting with the world, that they want to see change. They want to feel that their generation will not leave behind the same sorts of problems that they've inherited. And we want to create a space in which they can see through a cultural lens, a way in which they can make a contribution, in which they can shape the futures, their own futures, but also the futures of others. I think it's an exciting time, and it's the right place in which to do this. One of the most diverse and culturally interesting parts of London, but also one of the most creative. And I think if we bring all of these constituent parts together, I just think we can step away and we can just allow just the way in which people use creativity to dynamize conversations. We can allow it to transform our spaces. And I think that's the really exciting thing, that this isn't about us imposing on others what they should think. It's about others coming into our spaces and making something of themselves and making something of our spaces which wasn't otherwise there.
I agree with that 100%. Part of the answer to your question, Charles, is that we don't know the answer to the question, and we shouldn't try and find the answer to the question. We should feel our way towards it. There are some obvious routes to partnership and some tried and tested models, but we should, as Gus kind of says, be just sort of opening ourselves up to the possibility of partnerships that we don't really have any experience in and don't really understand yet, that will come from that generous offer. And will come from conversation and getting to know different partners in different contexts, where not necessarily always a sort of comfortable position for a museum like ours to be in, to not know the answer, not to be in control of the agenda, but that's why it's so important and so so full of potential.
Fantastic. Well, it's a hugely exciting project, and I absolutely, I'm really looking forward to visiting when it's open. But what's the timeline at the moment? Dare I ask?
Well, is there any such thing as a defined timeline for any project? I mean, look, the plan is as things stand is that we still hope to be opening the new collection centre at V&A East in 23, and we still hope to be opening our new museum as part of East Bank 23-24. But at the moment, obviously, you'd be a fool to just kind of put your house on that at the moment. So it's, we've just got to be pretty patient, which we're not very good at. We've got to be pretty patient over the next 6 months until we understand, how construction projects of this sort can carry on in a kind of COVID world, and then hopefully in a post-COVID world. So you know, the benefits of the project will be there whenever it opens. We want it to be open as soon as possible, because as soon as we open it, we start to kind of see its kind of magic. But yeah, we've just got to sit tight. And it asked me the same question again in, you know, February, and might be able to make you a promise.
Fair enough. Good stuff. Now, and my final question is, really, this has obviously been a very challenging year, let's say. Could you each give an example of a piece of art from the V&A collection that you find, I know, particularly comforting or pertinent right now?
Well, for me, I think one of my first experiences of the power of art was when my aunts would come and visit our house in South London when I was a youngish child, and they would always bring amazing cloth from Ghana, which was the place of my father's birth, and they would talk about these pieces of cloth like they were alive, you know, and it was just this sense of how you could animate an object, how you could bring it to life, how they could read these pieces of inanimate material like you could read a book, and it was exquisite to watch as much as to learn from them. And for me, there's a piece of fabric which is very evocative of those trips, which was it's a piece of strip woven cloth that was collected in the 1950s, and it's from southern Ghana, and it's a number of hearts which are just lined up in their various colors. It's not particularly spectacular, but it's just very evocative of a time in which there was a kind of a moment of love and learning, and it gave me a sense of what a museum could be, a space in which you could learn, but you could do it in such a sort of nurturing environment that left you with a real sense of being part of a community that stretched back across time, but also that would empower you as you step forward into the future. And I'm hoping that that is what young people will take from their first visits to our institution, that this is a place that they can come back to and that will give them a sense of both of something of their heritage, but also of what they can do to transform the futures of us all.
And Tim?
I'm going to slightly dodge your question. I mean, I find it just very difficult to single out an object. It's a different one on a different day of the week. That for me, one of the special things about working here is the other spaces, right. And the ability to drift from one space to another, from European sculpture into religious sculpture into kind of glass or silver or Renaissance, and it's we talked about the sort of tone and atmosphere of spaces, and I can see and indeed feel it myself even still from time to time, that some of the public spaces at the V&A can be quite forbidding, actually, because the kind of scale and the volume and the grandeur of them. But at the same time, depending on the day of the week and the mood I'm in, I find it quite comforting and almost cozy to be there. So for me, it's the variety, and it's the objects in the spaces that they've been, you know, that have been designed to house them, and the depth, the breadth of the collection, the kind of history. It almost just sort of seeps into you. For me, that's more important than a single object, because that does change from kind of hour to hour, never mind day to day, for me.
Good stuff. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you've got a few things in your inbox, so I really appreciate you taking the time. To our attendees, Gus and Tim are both on our system, so if you want to send them a question, you can send them a question directly. Yeah, and if you see a lorry driving around central London over the next few years, it may well be Tim or Gus driving it, so keep an eye on that. And yeah, so thanks a lot, and we shall speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.